Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Today I am about to show you guys how to make these 4 absolute cute tops made out of old t-shirts. They are all very easy, beginner friendly, looks very cute too when you put it on. So let's just jump right in. So for the first top, I'm taking a white t-shirt and an old top that fits me perfect, which I'm going to be using for tracing today. I'm adding pins to one side of the top near the armhole and marking it down with a help of a chalk. Once the armhole is marked, I'm sliding the top about 1 inch downwards just because I want my top to be a little longer when it comes to the length, and marking down the bottom. And also cutting it out, tracing the line on one side and then folding the piece in half to make sure it's symmetrical on both the sides, tracing the other side and cutting it out. Next, again, I'm placing my old top over the white piece to trace the neckline. Please use a scale to make it easier. I just have a bad habit of doing everything freehand, so I just did it just like that. Next, cutting the neckline on one side and then folding it in half to make sure it's symmetrical and cutting the other side. Next, I'm making small tiny slits in the corners just so it's easier to fold while hemming the neckline. Now moving to the leftover bits of the t-shirt, I'm cutting it out straight on both the sides so that I have 2 rectangle bits of fabric. Next, I'm also trimming out the thick hemline to make sure it's a plain piece with no hemline or nothing in it. Folding the piece in half and placing it diagonally near one armhole in a way that the armhole fits in perfectly to the piece. Next, I'm marking it down with a chalk and cutting out the excess. Also drawing a diagonal line starting from the bottom of the armhole with the help of a notebook. Couldn't find my scale, so I had to go with it. Next, I'm cutting out the excess following the diagonal line. Doing the same to the other piece, first trimming off the thick hemline. Folding the piece in half, tracing the pattern down from the previous bit of fabric and cutting off the excess. Now moving on to the top, I'm unfolding it to make sure it's placed open like one piece so I can add my sleeves. And I'm starting from the middle and adding pins to both the body piece and the sleeve together and adding more pins around the armhole. This way you can trim off any excess in case one piece turns out to be longer than the other. Once all the pins are added, I'm going to sew it following the pins and do the same to the other sleeve. Now here I'm using a zigzag stitch to sew the armhole because zigzag stitch allows the fabric to stretch without ripping off the fabric. Also make sure to not pull the fabric too much while sewing as it can create ruffle near the edges. So make sure you go slow. You can push the fabric but make sure you don't pull it too much. Next, I'm also hemming the neckline using a straight stitch, folding the edges twice, taking about 1 centimeter or a little more. So I am using a straight stitch and hemming it all around. Once I'm done adding the sleeves, the piece looks like this, which I'm going to fold it in half with the wrong side up and adding pins to the edges of the top on both the sides. Now we have 3 steps to follow here. First, hem both the sleeves edges with a straight stitch. Number 2, hem the bottom edges of the top using a straight stitch. As using a zigzag stitch here may create some ruffle unless you want some. Number 3, sew the edges of the top on both the sides starting from one sleeve using a zigzag stitch. And there I have my square neck white long sleeve top ready. It might look very simple, but I love the shape it gives to your body, and you can pair it with literally anything and it will look 10 on 10. So I definitely think you should give it a try. Moving on to the second top, I'm taking another white t-shirt and marking 13 inches as width of the top, and also marking 9 inches as length of the top and cutting it out. Also trimming off the thick hemline to make sure it's plain. Next, taking a red t-shirt and taking the white bits, first trimming off the hemline that we don't need, and then cutting out another piece tracing the white bits. Now I have 2 bits of red fabric and 2 bits of white fabric, which I'm placing one over another, making sure the edges match together. Cutting out a slight diagonal line to make sure it's bit narrowed down the bottom, and pinning it down near the edges, which I'm going to sew it using a zigzag stitch. Next, I'm cutting out long pieces of fabric from a black t-shirt, taking 4 inches as width, and then I'm joining the pieces together using a zigzag stitch to turn it into a one long piece. Next, I'm placing the red and the white piece with the wrong side up, and also the long piece with the wrong side up, matching the edges together and adding pins near the edges. Then I'm cutting off the excess and also doing the same with the leftover bit, matching it to the bottom edges of the top and pinning it down near the edges. Next, I'm going to sew it near the edges, keeping about 1 centimeter using a zigzag stitch. Once all the pieces are joined together in one, I'm placing the piece right side up and folding the black bit, keeping about 2 inches and adding pins near the seam line. Now, it's easy for the fabric to slip while doing this. So if you're not happy or you think somewhere it looks wider, don't hesitate to go back and redo it, because once you sew it down, it's gonna be there. So don't forget to make sure they all are pinned nice and parallel. After adding all the pins, I'm going to sew it near the hemline on both the top and the bottom using a zigzag stitch. And also going to sew down the edges together to turn it into a tube top. Now there I have my black, red and white tube top ready. The fact that I can wear this top in 3 different ways, like I can switch it into only red at the front, or sometimes just a white at the front, or even I can wear with both the red and white together at the front, giving me Tommy Hilfiger vibes. I am so happy that I can wear this top in 3 different ways and can never get over it. So I think it's a must-have in my opinion. For the next top, I'm taking my red t-shirt that I just used for the tube top. I'm marking 20 inches as the length of the top, drawing straight lines and cutting the piece out. Also cutting the piece in half to make sure it's 2 rectangle pieces. Now I won't trim out the thick seam line here like I did for the other ones, as I'll be using these pieces for the sleeves and I will have to hem the edges anyways, so this will minimize my work a little bit. I'll keep the hemline. Next, I'm folding the pieces in half, taking 4 inches near one edge of the sleeve and I'm marking it down with a chalk and going to connect it to the other corner of the sleeves and drawing a diagonal line. Also doing the same to the other sleeve and adding pins following the lines. I'm sewing the side edges following the straight line using a straight stitch. Now moving on to the rest of the t-shirt, I'm cutting out the sleeves, which I can save it for another DIY project. Next, I'm cutting the t-shirt out in few pieces. First, the excess of the back of the t-shirt. Second, the rest of the back of the t-shirt near the neckline. Third, the excess of the front of the t-shirt. Now I'm taking the two excess bits of the t-shirt from both back and front of the t-shirt that I just cut out, going to place them one top of another, matching the edges. First, cutting out any uneven edges to make sure it's straight. Next, I'm adding pin to one side of the edges, and because I need 16 inches for the back of my top, and here are the pieces folded in half, so I'm measuring 8 inches as width near the chest area and measuring 7 inches as width for the waist area, as this will narrow down the bottom edges of the top a little bit and fit the body well. Next, I'm sewing the pieces together using a straight stitch. Moving on to the back piece of the t-shirt, I'm following the previous piece, tracing it out and cutting the excess. Next, I'm taking a rectangle piece that I hemmed all around the edges and pinning it down to the middle of the piece. And first going to sew it on the sides using a straight stitch. And also going to sew it down in the middle in a straight line using a straight stitch, which will create 2 tunnels to the top. Next, I'm going to add the other piece both wrong side out and sew the edges using a zigzag stitch. Also, before doing all of this, don't forget to first hem the edges of both the front and the back piece. Once the piece is ready, turned into a tube top, I'm adding the sleeves on the sides. So to add the sleeves, all I'm doing is matching the seam line of the sleeve and the top and sewing about 1 inch back and forth using a straight stitch, and did the same to the other piece. Lastly, I also made a long strap, cutting out small pieces, joined the pieces together and made a thin long strap and added it to the tunnel so that I can gather the front of the top, pulling the straps and tie it to secure the gatherings, creating the ruched effect. And there I have my bordered crop top ready. I really love how it turned out, and I definitely think I'm going to wear it a lot, as it's going to be perfect for the spring season. For the last top, I'm taking another white leftover t-shirt and taking my old top to trace the armhole on one side with the help of a chalk and measuring 9 inches as the length of the top, drawing a straight line. Next, I'm cutting the piece out straight from one side following the line and folding the piece in half and tracing the other side to make sure it's symmetrical and cutting it out. Now I have 2 bits of fabric, which I'm going to use it for the front of the top and sew it all around the top edges using a straight stitch. Now here I'm not going to use a normal straight stitch, but the one biggest in my sewing machine, which means it sews like a normal straight stitch but with long gaps, and you can pull the thread because it's so loose and can create some gatherings. And then all I'm doing is pulling one thread very gently and trying to create some gatherings. While doing this, make sure you do it very slowly and gently, or else the thread can easily rip off. I'm also sewing a straight line near the bottom edge of the top, keeping about 2 inches from the bottom. Back to the t-shirt, I'm cutting out 2 rectangle pieces from the leftover bit. And I have 2 of them, which I'm going to sew it all around using a straight stitch, keeping about an inch open to flip it inside out. And then seal it from the top using a straight stitch. Next, I'm taking another white t-shirt and taking 6 inches as length, marking it down and cutting out in a straight line. Next, I'm marking 17 inches as width of the top and cutting out the excess. Now I have 2 bits of fabric, which I'm going to use it for the back of the top, keeping the seam line at the top and also cutting out a small diagonal line on one side to narrow down the bottom of the top, just like I did to the previous ones. Next, I'm pinning down the corners and sewing the sides all around, leaving the top part open using a zigzag stitch. Moving on to the other 2 pieces of the top, I'm gathering the bottom so it matches to the other piece, and this time I'm going to sew it in a straight line following the seam line using a zigzag stitch. And also going to add the other piece, sewing the sides using a zigzag stitch. Lastly, I'm going to use some thin elastic for the straps. I'm marking 4 inches from the corner on both the sides of the back and sewing it using a straight stitch. And there I have my ruched tank top ready. I think it looks so cute and pretty, and also had very minimal steps compared to the other ones, so this one would be my favorite. Let me know which one was your favorite, and don't forget to subscribe for more DIY videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time.